Real Recovery Show. We're here every week. Our show airs at noon every Friday. And if you've missed any of our previous episodes, please go to themeetingspace.com where all of them are posted. Today's episode is a very powerful episode. It's called Freedom is a State of Mind. And it's really interesting because as we grow up, our ideas of freedom, what we're going to be when we grow up, the things that we wish that we had more power over, my God, when I get to make my own money, the things I'll be able to buy, the people I'll be able to date, the relationships I'll be able to have, the things I'll be able to keep, whatever. We have all these ideas about who we think we want to be when we grow up, and all these ideas about who we think we should be. And a great portion of that influence comes from media and from peers, from other people, and just these set ideas of, you go to school and you're supposed to get a degree or get married and have the 2.5 kids or blah, blah, blah. You're supposed to look a certain way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I felt in many ways when I was growing up that because my parents were both in addictions and very much focused on, I guess, their own stories about who they thought they wanted to be and what made them happy and what they thought was going to make them free, that I actually had a lot of free time. Mm-hmm. I didn't have friends when I was a kid, and so I spent an inordinate sum of my childhood alone and read books and disappeared into fantasies and, put a lot of effort into budding addictions. And one could say, wow, there were times when I would disappear for a couple of days and my mom didn't even know I left the house because they just weren't even present. One could say, wow, you had a little bit too much freedom, so to speak. But I really wasn't free. I was suicidal by the time I was 12, and I felt like I lived in a prison. I felt like, in my mind, I thought my childhood was my prison. But it really, later I found out it was my head. And so, and then, using drugs and alcohol and thinking that, I'm free to move about the cabin and do my own thing and make my own decisions, and I'm not going to do it the way other people do it. I think outside of the box and I'm my own person and I'm going to do it my own way. And, I ended up creating a lot of stress for myself and a lot of problems and a lot of, learning curves and negative repercussions and health things happened. I got really sick from some of the decisions that I made, and not to mention, as I mentioned on probably all the episodes before this one, the addiction and all the things that I was doing with what I thought my free state of mind, my free will, which is really just running on stories and ideas that weren't even really mine. I ended up feeling not free. I felt unhappy and conflicted and borderline neurotic. I shouldn't say borderline. And and just all my efforts to just do that. I was not free. And I remember a movie called The Shawshank Redemption, and I remember this one scene in The Shawshank Redemption where this person was playing music, and when he was playing the music, where he would go with that music, and somebody said, you shouldn't do that to yourself. You shouldn't play the music because you're going to give yourself hope. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, well, why wouldn't I want to lose that feeling? Why wouldn't I want that feeling? And So, over time, getting into recovery and healing a lot of my stuff, I'm coming up on 24 years clean and sober. And God, I've just shifted some things just this week about relationships alone. And each time I've had a shift in perception, I'm freer. Mm-hmm. That the bars that have kept me imprisoned were We're always in my mind. They're always in everyone's mind. And but we always seem to tell ourselves that if I had this different, I would be okay. If I had that different, I would be able to be happy. And basing our serenity, our state of mind, our peace of mind, our self-love, everything on what we look like, who we're with, what we have, what we're doing, what people think of us, etc. How much money we have. That is the prison of our egoic mind. And if we do that enough, we will be more and more uncomfortable in our own skin. And some of us will use drugs and alcohol thinking that we're helping that to be free. And for the moment, when you use a drug or an alcohol, especially if you have the propensity to become an alcoholic or a drug addict, freedom from your thoughts, freedom from your self-consciousness, freedom from caring what people think in the moment, and the freedom to do the thing that you would do if you weren't imprisoned by all of your self-consciousness, right? And then that becomes its own prison. They have the saying that first the man takes the drink, then the drink takes the drink, and then the drink takes the man. That eventually the things we do becomes part of the cement, part of the bricks that build the wall around our life. The being afraid to get into a relationship or keeping people at an arm's distance and just being single. I want to be free. And then complaining that we feel like we're alone because we're not doing it for the right reasons, and lonely, and nobody loves us and stuff like that. And so today's episode is really important and really powerful for me because of that. The freedom is a state of mind. Mm-hmm. And so whenever we are telling ourselves, I would be happy if, or that shouldn't have happened, we are, in essence, putting our own, or I can't, I shouldn't, I should. All those are also ways in which we can imprison ourselves. So joined here today with me is somebody that I know and I love, and I think she's the most incredibly beautiful soul. And she is, I've known her for a lot of her sobriety, I would say. And she's coming up on 3 years, but 3 powerful years in her recovery of her sobriety. And I say that because, there's a saying, some people come for relief and some people come for recovery. And I feel like she comes for recovery. Yeah. Like she wants freedom, and she's wanted freedom. And until we were doing this episode, I didn't really think of how that's like part of her, like her biggest message for anyone. But one of the reasons why this is such a powerful message is because she's also facing 16 to 22 years in federal prison. And so when a person has that, it gives them either this, it gives them an opportunity, right, to either shift their perception and continue to heal and rise up and realize where their real freedom comes from in their spirit, or buy into even more the story of, I can't be happy because of blah, blah, blah. And I'll say this last thing. It's not just, it's not just whether or not, you have a relationship or you have a house or you have a job or you have a whatever. This can also be with illness, where you can have an injury, you can not be able to walk, you can have epilepsy, you can end up, with a situation where you have a great amount of pain. You could have, back issues, spine issues, pain issues in any other way. You could have lost limbs, you could, etc., right? And yet, there are people in this world that have had the experience of shifting from the form of their life and their body being so important that it would dictate, right, that what their worth is and what their happiness is. And they've shifted and shown that even without limbs and even with this situation and whatever like that, that the light in them is so bright and the passion that they have is so strong to find a way to see it differently and to emancipate from the idea that you can't be happy and you can't have whatever because of whatever it is. And I myself, for those of you who know what I've been through, I've had major spine issues that they said that I should be in a coma for. I've had epilepsy. I've had thousands of seizures. I've had endometriosis that I had to heal from. 25% of my life for 2 decades were like in massive amounts of pain, and PTSD and multiple addictions. And like I could easily say, you know, what's the point, you know, right? And live in that pity pot, right? And instead, having the attitude of wanting to shift my perception and accept what I cannot change and change what I can change and take it one step at a time. It's crazy how, with all of that, some things did get better and some things I just don't even think about, to tell you the truth, anymore. Because my attitude has gotten to a place where I'm free, because it's all here. So at this point, I'm going to introduce my friend Kelly, who's going to share a little bit about herself, and we're just going to, Tay and I are just going to interject and ask questions as we go, and I'm super excited. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You know, I was thinking as you're talking, and it's really amazing. You know, it's a paradox because, you know, a little bit about my story. I got arrested in December of 2019. So in this December, it'll be 3 years that I've been on what's called pretrial, and that I'm not going to trial. I signed a plea, but they just call it, and it's the period in between you're arrested and then you're sentenced. It has forced me to examine myself. It produces patience, which I am extremely impatient, and thank God for that. You know, thank God that I was able to have this time by the grace of God, you know, to really prepare myself, you know, for what's coming. You know, and before I got arrested, you know, my co-defendant and I met my co-defendant when I moved to Vegas. I moved to Vegas in 2016. I met him through a circumstance which was pretty bad, you know, and I started getting involved with him, and it was toward the end of before we were arrested, we were pretty much financially free. I mean, I didn't work anymore, and I had all the freedom in the world. You know, I was traveling a lot. I could do whatever I want. We would have these crazy shopping sprees and just like not care about the price tag. And I was still trapped in my addiction, you know, and even with all that financial freedom, mentally I was suffering. You know, mentally I was in a prison of my own making. And it's so interesting how when that was ripped away from me, because I lost everything in one day, you know, I never saw him again. I probably never will. Or at this point, I don't know why I'd even want to see him again. You know, I lost my dog. My dog was in California where he was when he was arrested, so I never saw my dog again. My car, my clothes, my phone, my freedom, you know. And the courts put stipulations on me to seek counseling. I was court mandated to see a counselor. And, you know, all my life I've needed help. You know, all my life I have, you know, like you said, from a very young age, my first prison was depression. You know, my first prison was depression. And like you said, I had these wild fantasies, and it wasn't a typical fantasy. Like, I was so depressed that to put myself to sleep when I was a kid, I typically would think about suicide, and it brought me a lot of comfort.
I actually did that too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I really think that is a keystone of like an addict or alcoholic is, you know, suicide attempts. You know, I drank and used because I really wanted to die. I just didn't want to actually do it. So I drank and used to the point of trying to die, really. And sometimes I would. Sometimes I would drink and use, hoping that I wouldn't wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just a form of this, like you said, putting conditions on who I think I am and who I think I should be. You know, that my whole life has been this just dog chasing its tail of people pleasing. Yeah. And I have to be this person. I have to be chameleon myself to be these people. And I've lived so many different types of lives. I've had so many different types of circles of friends. And I never understood who I was until I came into recovery. And I'm so thankful that I was in enough pain to let all of my ideas go and just accept help. You know, and that was the point in which I started on a new freedom, you know, something that I haven't experienced before. And it's so interesting how the most freedom I had, it led me to a prison. And then whenever all that freedom was gone, it led me to a mental and spiritual and emotional freedom, you know, so I just really talk a lot about how you can be out there in the world and living life, and you're in this prison of constantly trying to chase a dollar, trying to chase a girl or a husband or a, you know, family or a kid, or I want this and that, and everybody expects this and this of me. And you know, addiction in itself is obviously a prison. Yeah. But normal people live in that prison too. You know, normal people have this idea of what I should be in society, and they and if you take it a step further, it's like they never have the blessing of being in pain like addicts and alcoholics are, to where they seek out a higher level of spirituality. You know, a lot of people will die just living this mundane life, never really connecting with themselves, and that's not
never waking up.
Waking up. And I have really woken up. You know, I've had a true spiritual experience that comes in waves. You know, my spiritual experience, sometimes I'll just be driving down the street and I'll just cry because I'm so grateful. You know, I'm so grateful for all the things that led to where I am now, because I see the bigger picture. Yeah. You know, and I see that all my experiences through my life have led to a point in which I can help people and have a purpose. And before, I was just running on, you know, my will, self-will, you know, whatever I want. And I don't care who I hurt, and I don't even know how, and I don't even know how I'm hurting people. You know, I wasn't ever a bad person. I was a sick person. And I didn't really, it's so interesting because, you know, I was a big Instagram model, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like any of these people. but I'm still in this prison of having to, you know, keep up with the Kardashians or whatever. You know, I don't say keeping up with the Joneses, because like who are the Joneses? Everybody knows who the Kardashians are. But it's like
depending on the generation.
Exactly. Now it's keeping up with the Kardashians. But it's like, especially in Vegas, you know, I worked in the nightlife industry. You know, I worked in strip clubs since I was 18 years old. I'm 35 now. And you know, Vegas is a whole different monster. You know, Vegas, you have to drive a certain kind of car, and you have to have a certain position at the right club and the right friends and the right this and X amount of followers. And it's like, I'm trapped in this idea of who I think I'm going to be, or who I am putting on to be. And it's so interesting because throughout my entire modeling Instagram life in Vegas, people only see the best parts of what you allow them to see on social media. And if they had any clue of what was going on behind the scenes, you know, my co-defendant was extremely abusive. I mean, I literally had to like escape from him many times. And it's if they only understood like I was living on my mom's floor at one point because I had to just get away, and I'm like down to my last $100 that I think I have to spend on an outfit rather than paying my rent because I have already booked this photo shoot and I have to be there, but like my bills are late. You know, it was just this crazy life, and I was never happy. You know, I was never happy. You know, at one point I was living downtown Las Vegas and in this really, really nice luxury high rise, and I was constantly alone. I was constantly alone, and the reason why I thought I should get this loft is like, then people are gonna love me, you know, because I come from a place of, you know, middle class. I grew up in New Mexico, and New Mexico is very predominantly Hispanic, and I'm very white. So I'm like a prisoner in my skin, and I'm a prisoner in my, I don't know, I was so shy. Being shy is definitely a self-conscious prison.
Absolutely.
I would say so.
Yes.
And
I was always
you're afraid.
Right.
You know, and even the word shy, like they don't call it what it is.
Right.
You're afraid. You're afraid of not being liked. You're afraid of saying the wrong thing. You're afraid of turning someone off. You're afraid of somebody saying something to you and hurting you. Like you're
put
afraid.
myself out there.
So you're just gonna not say anything. Right.
And
but that person's just shy. Like it sounds so cool.
Or demure. It's like, no, I'm in my ego. She's just so cute and shy.
She's so sweet.
Like, no, I probably have the biggest ego in the room.
I would say that was my biggest prison, was that piece of shyness and, you know, not really wanting anybody to really get to know me. And I would talk about being lonely and not loved and stuff, but I also didn't put myself out there to anybody, you know? And I mean, we all joke about my not wanting to be hugged ever. But but part of that is a fear. It's a fear of people, you know, and what is that fear? And so that's a prison of our own making, you know?
Yeah. And you were talking about how, you know, good that you were in enough pain, good that you woke up, you know, and good that you had to look at that. Because I often think that too, you know, we were talking about on the way over to the radio station that a lot of times people are in the prison of, I married this person, or I'm in this relationship with this person, and in essence we have a contract. You know, this is what we did. Now I have to do this. And even if I love the person and I want to be in the relationship, there's an essence of I have to. And if a person goes and it's not healthy, let's just say, right? Because this is not saying anything bad about relationships that work, right? But the relationship that maybe doesn't work, the one in which now people feel free to not be nice or not be respectful or not be honest or not really be communicative or compassionate or really truly joining or growing together or any of the things that make a relationship healthy and happy. Sometimes you'll see a person who they'll be celebrating like 30 years of being married to a person, but you know what their relationship is like, and everybody's so proud of them. That's so awesome and good for you. I wish I had that myself and blah, blah, blah. But that person's in this low level of discomfort and malaise and uninspiration, you know, like a not feeling alive, just proverbially just watching the TV screen of life as it passes day to day, and not even knowing that at some point they lost their yes, you know, or something. I don't know. And yet the person who goes through the divorce, right, they might be saying, I need something different. And yet, I'm so sorry for you that happened. It didn't work out. You know, and it's like, well, this person is now going to go through grieving. They're going to grieve the fantasy of the relationship that didn't work out. They're going to look for what they really do want now. They're going to be in enough pain that they're going to end up reevaluating things, right? And so, yeah, that's why they say pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth, because it's when the mind gets to this tipping point where it says, okay, you know what, enough is enough. I really want to shift in perception. I really want to have a different life. Like, that was then, but I don't want to do that again. I want to be happy. I want to be free, where it votes for freedom, you know? And so there's a lot of people who are kind of problem drinkers, partiers. I have stress. I'm going to go home. I really need a drink. People, you know, people who are just hanging around talking about nothing but politics, and nothing wrong with politics, but nothing but politics, nothing but anger, judgment. They shouldn't, blah, 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 self-righteous, da, 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 da. And not really having any deep connection or awareness of who they really are, and having a sense of freedom and peace. And they're living, they're alive, but they're not alive, right? Yeah. And so that's the prison. And I lived in that prison. I know what that prison feels like. And it's kind of funny because you don't really realize how much of a prison it was until you get out of it. Right. You know, until something changes and you start to, like, I guess, excise the cult of your own story, the cult of your own society, the people you hung out with, the story, the every day that you did. You step outside, or you're forced to step outside with one sharp, okay, up until this point, this was your life. Now, this is your life, you know, and it's traumatic, and it shakes up your psychic snow globe, and it says, all right, Kelly, why don't we stop this for a second and find out who you really are? So that you don't have your whole existence like that. And then what a powerful insight to be able to say, you know, if you're in enough pain to do something about it, good.
Right. And what an interesting insight to think of, you know, for Kelly, I'm sure getting arrested was a horrible experience, but she has taken that experience and learned from it, instead of, like, judging it and saying that because of this, her life is going to be crap for the rest of her life, you know, like instead of that, she has taken that and given herself an opportunity to grow, you know, and change.
And she's really done the work. I've seen her go through a lot of shifts in perception of, this is how former Kelly thought, but now that doesn't fit my life now. So how can I do that? How can I see this differently? And it just forced you to come from a deeper, more authentic place.
I was gonna say, and that, you know, that where I'm at now took a lot of work. I mean, when I first got arrested, it was like I didn't want to get out of bed. You know, what got me sober was I wanted to kill myself. And, you know, I've wanted to kill myself for a long time, you know, and you know, the loft that I mentioned earlier, I told my co-defendant all the time, like, I would just be there alone with Xanax and liquor, and I would just be escaping constantly. And I would always tell him, I feel like I'm in a really fancy rabbit cage or prison. And it was like, I sometimes, you know, my DTs or my come down, or me just dealing with a life without a drink or a drug yet, I would have these severe panic attacks. And I think it's been a long time. I feel like I lived on the 12th floor or the 11th floor, and my anxiety attacks would be hardcore. I mean, I would feel gravity. I would feel the blood in my body. You know, I would have these crazy, like, just constant loopholes for hours of death and God and what's the purpose, and, you know, just this, my friends are dead, you know, because I stuffed that down. I've lost a lot of friends. You know, 2 of my friends were actually murdered, and that's why, a week in between each other, that's why I moved to Vegas. It's a long story, but, you know, and I never really dealt with the deaths of my friends. I've lost a lot of people through addiction, you know, but it's taken a lot of work, and I was literally in shock after I got arrested. I mean, like, in shock. Like, when they first arrested me, they said I was looking at 20 to life, and I was like, kill me now, you know. The greatest fear when they told me that was, it's going to be so much harder to kill myself in jail. How do you kill yourself in jail? That was my biggest fear. It's like, how am I going to do this successfully? Because outside there's a lot of ways, but in jail, I feel like it's harder to kill yourself. That was like my greatest fear, was I wasn't even going to be able to die. But I literally, only because of the grace of God, I was released to my mom. And I just was in shock. I mean, like, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. All I could do was drink. And I just was like, I felt like I was going to have a for real mental breakdown and not come back. I thought that I was going to like mentally snap and like have to be like locked up.
Right.
For real. Right. And I just told her, I need to talk to someone like right now, you know, and she got me an appointment with a grief and loss counselor, and I talked to her, and she thought that I was an alcoholic based on my history, and I sought recovery, and it's been this like long road of growing pains, and I'm so grateful that my my end of my old life was so severe, because if I had any little wiggle room, right, I would still think I got it. Yeah. And I would still think that, oh, well, I'm still this person. You know, I working in strip clubs, you know, I had a dancer named Dylan, and that was always my blackout name too, because I was a blackout drinker. And when I would do things that are shameful or I was guilty over, when I was blacked out, I'd be like, that wasn't me, that was Dylan. So it was the death of Dylan. And it's so interesting. That's what I should name my book, The Death of Dylan.
That is actually really good.
It's really interesting too, because I'll never forget, like, when my mom picked me up from getting released, we were driving through Vegas, and you know, there's all these huge hotels and stuff, and I literally felt like I was driving through my graveyard. You know, it was like, this is my grave. I am dead. I feel like, and I did die that day, but I was reborn, you know, and that comes through just, I mean, they talk about it in the hero's journey. You know, you have this life, and then you have these challenges, and then you come back a new person. You know, I don't remember where I heard it, some Buddhist saying, but you have to die 1,000 times to really live. And it's constantly killing your ego, constantly checking your ideas of who you think you are, and who you should be around. You know, relationships are a trap, because a lot of times we are led by fear, and I don't want to be alone, and you know, I don't want him to leave me or her to leave me, because that would be I'm not worthy, obviously. It's not that we just don't match.
It's more like, than that too. It's, I want to be a good person. I don't want to abandon a person. I can't leave this person now. This person needs me. Or, you know, I made a commitment, and I can't be that person that breaks the commitment, and all the family thinks that I'm a good person because I'm doing this. Who would they think about me? You know, and on and on and on and on and on, where we're not even making decisions, right, based on what really feels like our free yes. We're making decisions based on love, fear, fear, stories. And my stripper name was a male name too. It was Brianna, but it was based on Brian, because I was like, either going to be Tommy, Joey, Brianna. That was so funny. But yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Okay. Well, at this time, we're going to take a break. And please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, and do not represent any 12-step program, or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a bit. Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Remember, you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Amazon Fire TV. And you can listen to us on the PHLV Radio app, or you can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Radio. And if none of that means anything to you, just go to themeetingspace.com and click on the Real Recovery Show, where you'll see all of our episodes there. And we'll also post the episode every Friday, so you can see it right when it comes out as well. Anyway, so we're back, and it's kind of interesting. We were thinking about how, if somebody is told that they're going to be in federal prison, right, and that they have maybe a certain amount of time, what are you going to do at that time? It's kind of like if somebody's told, because it's actually kind of interesting. I actually currently, right now, have some people in my life, and I'm not sure why it's happening all right now, maybe some classroom I'm in, right? Mm-hmm. But I have an ex-boyfriend who has a terminal brain tumor. I have 3 friends in recovery who all are fighting cancer. And it's been interesting watching each of their walk through that, because here is a doctor saying, here is your sentencing, this is what's going to be happening. And what are they doing with the perceived amount of time of being able to do, air quotes, whatever they want, or something, right? And so also recently, I've been really playing with the idea of, what would I do today? What would I really care about today if tomorrow I wasn't going to be here, if I was going to die? And it's something that everybody's heard of before. If you're on your deathbed, what are you going to regret the most? Nobody's going to say, I regret the most not spending more time in the office or something like that. But it was actually just because, like you were saying, killing off the ego, which means letting go of all these different scripts and all this programming that we're running on. Something as trivial, it seems, but I was at a drum circle the other night, and like, it's kind of funny when I'm at an event and current me gets visited by former me in my mind, former stripper, former drug addict, current drug addict, but former using person. And it wasn't a big enough drum circle yet for me to disappear into, right? So I'm not in my comfort zone of whatever my comfort needs to be. And in that moment, I'm sitting and I'm like, I want to get up and I want to dance. And I couldn't do it because of this, right? And I was just like, and then not only could I not do it because of this, but then I had another visitor of a version of me have to point out that, oh, Lisa, you're so awake and you're so spiritually advanced, and yet here you are at a drum circle and you can't get up because of what somebody might think. The people at a drum circle, like, you're carrying what people think at a drum circle. But anyway, if you've never been, you don't understand. I can't explain it. But anyway, so this thought came up as I was staring at this fire, and it was, what would you do if you knew you were going to die tomorrow? Not that you're choosing it, but what would you do if I said I would get up and dance? And right in that moment, I had a shift, and I got up and danced. And I had some people, some women, one who I mentor, one who I've had mentor me, and just really, really close women friends with me. And one of them got up and danced with me too, and it was so adorable and fun and whatever. And I would have a self-conscious moment, and then I would go, no. And then I would close my eyes, and I would just get right back into it and just be my true, authentic self in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And so every day is this day where we get to wake up and we get to consciously choose to be just our best effort to be our truest self.
Right.
And, and what are you going to do? So here you are, right? And you're facing 16 to 22 years in federal prison, and Tay and I have watched you, right? So we've seen what you've done with that time so far, right? And someone could easily say, and I'm sure you had, like you were saying, fuck it. Forget it. Life's over. I'm not doing anything. But instead, you've been capitalizing on that time in a way that's not just woken you up for you to be more more awake and more aware, but like what you've done with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've seen you do things where instead of woe is me, you're like, hey, this is what I know, and this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going through. So you have freedom too. Like, you know, like I feel like you've given a lot of people who don't know that they have a life after, you know?
Right.
And I feel like we all come in to recovery in these little prisons that we've created ourselves because we believe that the substance is our only freedom from the way we feel.
Right.
Like, we don't have this idea that there could be anything else out there that could give us relief, you know? And I talked a little bit earlier, and I mean, we talked a little bit on a previous episode about like how for me, I was just so trapped in this prison because of the way I love. And now that like I'm out, like not just in my circle, but in this circle.
Okay,
you know?
So what she's talking about is we had an LGBT episode, LGBTQ, etc., and you need to go see that.
Yeah.
So
you
not right
absolutely
now.
need to go
Wait
see
till
it.
the end of the show and then go back and watch that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But so, you know, for me, like finding that freedom in recovery, because I wasn't out until I was in recovery. But just like for you, like, you know, knowing that like you had this lifestyle where you thought the clothes and the money and the men and the status was the freedom.
Right.
You know, I've lived in Las Vegas my whole life. I used to do delivery and installs for computers and TVs and that sort of stuff. And I used to deliver and install to these high rises and be like, wow, do people really live like this? And you know, like think of like, that must be so cool. But you're saying it was a dungeon. Like, you know, it was its own cage. Like, so like, but now you get to like give people like, this is actually what freedom looks like. And it's in this recovery thing that we
And it's not to say
experienced.
that living in a high rise in and of itself
is bad.
Is bad.
No,
it is
right.
it
No,
is
it's
it is
definitely not.
really the state of mind. It's really what is
100%.
it for?
Right.
What is it for? What is the money for? What is what is it all for? And if it's just to have more things, right? And to just keep having to do the rat race of like, okay, I gotta use the money that I make to buy this, to do this, so that I look like this, so that I can do this, and so that I can make more money, so that I can take the money, so that I can do this, blah, 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 blah.
I
And
mean,
it's
because
like,
there's nothing to say that you won't have that again. You'll just have it honestly. Like you'll have it without the you know,
legal
possibility of
part.
going back to prison.
yeah,
you know?
but even if somebody has the money and whatever, and it's all honest, like you were saying, they could still be in a prison because
Absolutely.
there's other levels of dishonesty that are occurring within themselves, about themselves, about
Right.
what they really feel. You know, a person can spend their entire time working and having businesses and making tons of money and be miserable. They could also make tons of money and actually be spiritually centered and
yeah.
and whatever. But
100%.
I love this focus. This focus is amazing because it really deals with the real issue. Like
Right.
no matter what your problem ever is, your problem is never what you think it is. We're never
Right.
upset for the reason we think. We're never who we think we are when we're upset either. You know, with our rights and our stories of self-righteousness. It's we're imprisoned by our own ideas that we should be something that other than we are. We should be somewhere other than we are. We should have something other than we have. And people should treat us other than they do. And,
Right, because it's everybody else's fault.
yeah, and we should have acted differently than we did. And you know, we should have more accomplishments than we do as we compare ourselves to other people. And at the end of the day, like when you were saying, like, man, people have done that to me too, where they've looked at, you know, I was a model, I was a stripper, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. I had made $8,000 in one day, right? And I was feeling myself needing out of the industry. You know, I interviewed for Playboy, and then I realized that if I signed a contract with Playboy from this person, from me, I was going to be screwed because they were going to be able to control we've talked about this, what I look like, whether I can lose weight, I have to lose weight, how my skin tone, which I don't get tan, I would have to be tan or whatever like that. And Jesus, I was already neurotic, you know, in my addictions and the bulimia and the body dysmorphic disorder and all the stuff that stereotypically can come with being a stripper and a dancer and a model, because I was that person. But God, the prison.
Yeah.
The prison of that.
One thing that I wanted to say before you go on, you mentioned about it being other people's faults. And one of my favorite things that I've heard you say is that the people that arrested you, you've thanked.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't thanked them yet, but I can't wait until the day where I can thank, you know, the FBI agents that investigated us and the people that arrested us. And I have never had, you know, it's interesting, the belief of, I grew up in a city where there's a lot of gang stuff, and you know, I grew up with this idea of any law enforcement's bad, and that's just not true. The amount of times that I have been pulled over and actually got a DUI or a ticket. I mean, I only have one DUI, and I've been pulled over drunk many times. You know, they're just people who made better decisions. And
maybe
different decisions.
Yeah. And I never had more respect for law enforcement until I was handcuffed in the back of an SUV, and I was like, it was like a pivotal moment. I was like, oh wow, I want to be on that side of the handcuffs. They're like having coffee, and, you know, this is their job, and this is just another day, and this is like my breaking point. But you know, kind of what you're saying, the only prison and the only freedom is your mind, period. You know, people, and like you were saying, you know, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can still be in prison or you can be free. And you can have nothing and be in prison and be free. Like, you know, I read Eckhart Tolle's The New Earth. And he was saying that you can have a spiritual awakening whether you're a millionaire on a private jet or you're in a prison cell, but he said it's more likely going to happen to the person in the prison cell. And why is that? Well, that person in the prison cell doesn't have any distractions of, I'm on my jet and I need to go here and I have this and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And not to say that people who have a lot of money can't be spiritual. That's not true. But
But since pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth in many ways,
and humility,
is a big it does one. It does have to shift. It does have to hit something where they feel like it's not enough. So you are going to prison. Unless something else happens.
I try not to say I am because I don't want to like manifest it.
Exactly. That's why I stopped. Never mind.
So I always say if. I mean, is the likelihood? Sure. It's probably 99% a likelihood. But I still say if.
So I know people who have gone to prison. And I know people who have gone to prison for several years and then came out and I saw them after, right? And I was so sure, like this one particular person I'm thinking of, that when he went, that he was, because he was so, I mean, we used to sit and read Siddhartha together, and like, he goes to prison, and then when he came back, I'm thinking, what have you read? Let's continue our conversation. And he said he watched like Jerry Springer shows and stuff like that. Like he said he just got into a headspace where he just wanted to just check out and pass the time and just, you know, and just whatever. And I was thinking, God, whatever. But then since he's been out, it took a second, but I've watched him get reignited and back passionate again about, you know, his healing. But there's a saying I heard once that I love very, very much, is that people serve as an inspiration or an ominous warning. I like that. They'll always serve as one or the other. And so if I see that, I go, well, you know, what am I doing today? Right. You know, am I getting so caught up in my work that I'm not actually spending enough energy on shifting my mind, becoming more authentic, calling bullshit on some of my stuff, and getting freer? Right. Am I helping people? Am I really feeling that passion of seeing the light go on in someone else's eyes? So you know people who have gone to prison too, correct? Or you've spoken to?
Yeah, I've been really involved with taking the message of recovery to places that need it. And I've talked to a lot of women who just got out of either jail or prison, mostly state prison, which is a lot different. For people who don't know the difference between state time and federal time, state time you can get parole. So say you were sentenced to 10 years, you might get out in 5.
Okay.
In federal prison, you do 85% of your time.
Oh,
so you get 10 years, you're doing 8.5 years.
No, automatically, like you can't. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know.
Federal time, it's longer, but it's a lot better as far as prison goes. So I haven't met yet a woman who has got out of federal prison. I've mainly only talked to women who were in state prison, but I'll never forget this woman that I talked to. She was an older lady. I want to say she was in her early 70s, late 60s, and she said because of COVID, they had her, and she had cancer, so she had to be confined because she was at high risk of dying because of COVID. So she was in, what do they call it? It's not SEG, but she was in, is it SEG? I forget, segregation?
Yeah.
It's not it.
Isolation?
Yeah, where the hole is what they call it. I don't know what it's called. I forget.
I should know. I've seen like every episode of Orange is the New Black, but whatever.
But so you have 1 hour out of your cell a day. Yeah, so isolate. And she was in there for a long time, through mostly COVID. And she said, I have never been more connected to God when I was in there.
Wow.
And it was really inspirational. I get chills talking about it because she said that she would have conversations with God and God would tell her what to draw. And she was just so connected and in the moment. Being locked up, it's you're forced to be in the moment. And so often we get caught up in our errands that we got to run, and I have to do this, and marking stuff off my calendar. I'm doing it now, and we hear so many times you have to be in the moment, in the day, and it's so difficult because we're constantly in the past or thinking about the future, and really, am I ever in the moment? I'm in the moment when I'm meditating. I'm in the moment when I'm praying. I'm in the moment when I'm talking to someone. I'm in the moment when I'm reading. When I was during COVID, it was, I know a lot of people, it was hard, but for me, it was the best time because I was so fresh into recovery. I was falling in love with recovery. I was getting this new relationship with God. And I had to watch my escapism. So I noticed that when I would just binge watch Netflix, because what else are you going to do? It's COVID. There's nothing else to do. Thank God for that. For me personally, I would get depressed, and I would start thinking in the back of my head, I'm going to prison. So I couldn't handle it. I was in so much pain at that time where I was I can't think about this. So I just dove into books. I just read all throughout.
This is really an important. It's an important thing to say because I don't watch the news. I somehow find out all the things I need to find out.
Me too.
I'm on a need-to-know basis.
And
really somehow
important.
People tell me what I need to know.
Exactly.
But I don't want, I don't surround myself with people who are negative. I don't want to hear the drama. It's it doesn't mean that, don't tell me what's going on with your life. And if you're struggling and you're going through something, tell me what's going on if you're wanting a solution, if you're wanting help, if you're wanting to grieve those feelings, if you're wanting to do that, because I need to be focused on the solution. Former me was chronically suicidal. Former me was constantly feeling uncomfortable in her own skin, right? Because of the tapes, because of the programming, because of the news playing in my mind that's so negative. It was always looking for the negative angle. It was always waiting for the other shoe to fall. It was so chronically negative. No wonder I was depressed all the time. No wonder I wanted to kill myself. And if I watch things where I'm checking out and I'm feeding myself just stuff that, it's not to say I don't watch shows, it's just what I watch it with. I watch to understand. I watch to see what comes up for me in it. I watch mindfully, right?
Yeah.
Mindfully.
But if it's like a super negative focused kind of thing, with a lot of drama and a lot of judgment and a lot of superficiality and a lot of taking things that are not important and raising it to the level of importance, and people fighting and getting catty with each other over stupid things that don't matter. Yeah. But it feeds the part of the mind that wants to buy into the BS, wants to be caught up in the drama, that wants that, as a distraction from what's really important. And, to shut off the Netflix and to say, you know what, how am I going to feed my mind? Because, there is a saying, and I'm not really happy with the saying because I'm vegan, but I'll say it anyway, that there are two wolves and they're fighting in your mind. And how do you know which one is going to live? It's going to make it. You have the negative one and you have the positive one. How do you know which one is going to make it? And the saying goes, it's the one you feed. Mm-hmm. And so I just got the chills. Mm-hmm. And so that's beautiful, because here you have all this time. And even during COVID, everybody had so much more free time, right?
Well, most everybody.
A lot of people, right? Yeah. It's true. We didn't, but whatever. But the concept again of freedom, what's freedom is authenticity and being in alignment and being mindful and knowing and keeping the perspective of knowing what's really important. Because the moment that we get all caught up in what we think is so important, we start losing our peace. We start getting attached, right? Start getting miserable, start getting angry, resentful. Expectations are not met. People are not acting the way they're supposed to, and nothing's happening the way we think it's supposed to happen. And what ends up happening is we have no peace and a whole bunch of drama. And it always takes wake up. Mm-hmm. Wake up. Yeah. Because in this moment, you are alive. Mm-hmm. And it's all based on your perception in this moment. You take this attitude if, just for shits and giggles, you end up going to prison, because we don't know. But if you take this attitude that you keep cultivating right now into everywhere you go, and there are people that want to wake up too, that will have a conversation with you, and will see your light, and the light in them will recognize the light in you, and that your presence will help them to wake up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it takes one candle to light 100 candles.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And it's interesting because before I got arrested, I prayed. Mm-hmm. And I prayed a week before I got arrested, and I said, and I don't know why I prayed like this. Normally it's help me get out of this, or, I was going through a crazy breakup, and my ex was blackmailing me and threatening to kill me. And so I'd be like, please pray. I'd pray for him to die. So it was always a selfish prayer, but I don't know what came over me. And I just prayed God, work through me and bring me toward my higher purpose. And then I got arrested. So I know that everything was cultivating for me to wake up, and to reevaluate what's important in my life. My addiction really came, and I wanted to talk about this. So I was in college. For 7 years, and I did really, really well because I thrive on structure. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated, and it's kind of crazy for me to look back, I'm like, how did I party hard, work a job, sometimes 2 jobs, and go to college and get straight A's? I don't know how I did it. I couldn't do it now, but I graduated in 2012, and when I graduated in 2012, and I went to art school, so I was constantly drawing, I was constantly painting, I was constantly being creative, mm-hmm. and when I graduated, it went all to hell. I mean, when that structure was taken away, when I didn't have to write a paper or take a class or blah, 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 or, mm-hmm. Do a speech mm-hmm. on whatever, it was just balls to the wall, drinking every day, using every day. And I was like, this is freedom. Like, I get to let my hair down. And, as a bartender.
As you were putting brick after brick of your prison up.
100%. Every idea that I had about what I should be, was another brick in my prison. And every drug and drink and every man that was abusive, because I had this idea of I'm not worth it, and I hate myself. So I'm obviously going to attract people who aren't going to love me. How can I hate myself and attract someone who loves me?
Right.
I have to, I hate myself and I attract people who hate themselves.
To prove.
So it's like, we're just like
to prove my
each
own stuff.
Mouth,
to prove that I'm unworthy.
Yes.
To prove it.
To feed this idea of everyone's bad and woe is me and I'm a victim, and all that crazy stuff.
Which a victim mindset is an imprisoned mindset.
100%. And normal, I won't say who, but I have a family member who is in that prison currently, and I watched this person through COVID, and it's so interesting it's so interesting to watch people in COVID. And she loves to complain and she loves the victimhood. And this is a normal person.
Yeah.
She has never been in trouble and she's not an addict, she's not an alcoholic. However, she's just so consumed, and COVID was the perfect thing to just constantly be a victim and excuse and fear. And it really brought out, I shouldn't say it brought out, it exaggerated how you were living already. And I've learned through my experience in my life to not label things good or bad, because all the worst things to ever happen to me has led me to better things. And all the quote good things, money, this boyfriend, drugs and alcohol, led me to the worst things. So it's like when people tell me, oh, I got fired, or oh, I broke up with my boyfriend, and oh, I lost my business, I'm like, congratulations. Congratulations, because that's not for you. What's for you is for you. What's not for you is not for you. And God is good, and God will lead you or help you facilitate a better life if you choose it. But it comes down to free will. Free will is a choice, and it's like, am I gonna feed the negative wolf? Am I gonna feed the positive wolf? Am I gonna make the best out of a situation? Am I going to reevaluate where I am and reevaluate who I am and what I want? I went through a breakup and I'm so grateful for it. I stayed in fear. We both were forcing it toward the end. And it was like,
that's usually how it is at the end of a relationship.
It's like,
that's how you know what the end is.
Exactly. And, I stayed because I had this fear that no one was going to treat me right, because I had such severe abusive relationships, that here is a person who didn't hurt me physically and didn't lie to me and didn't cheat on me. And I'm like, I have to hold on for dear life because I don't want to go back to what I used to do. But when I broke up, or when we separated, and he's a good person, we just don't mesh. Our ideals are different. And that's not good or bad. We're just not right for each other. I reevaluated myself hard, and I really learned the ingredients of a happy life is trusting God, being of service to other people, and working on myself. And I knew the ingredients, I just never really baked the cake.
When the ingredients, when it really, really comes and we really, really get it. So thank you so much for joining us. This is so powerful. I knew it would be. And God, you're such a beautiful light. And I hope to stay in your life forever and ever and ever. And so thank you. And thank you for joining us today on the Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.